Welcome to All Things Autism by Court One, where we explore the many facets of autism support, awareness, and advocacy. My name is Manav Raval, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Pranavi Ganti.
Today, we're joined by a guest to talk about school, learning, healthcare, and how people can feel more supported and understood. We'll dive into their experiences and perspectives so we can all learn something new.
Thank you for being here today, Jake. Let's start with language learning. Spanish, for example, is something a lot of people study in school. Learning a new language can be exciting, but can also be challenging. So we want to know, what do you find hardest about learning Spanish?
Spanish is fun, but like you said, it can be hard because it's hard to understand the syntax and also I do my best to speak in sentences, but sometimes when I listen to Spanish songs, it's hard for me to understand what they're saying.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a common struggle faced by many. How often do you learn Spanish and when did you?
Well, I first learned Spanish when I was a kid, and my babysitter Stella, who is from Madrid, my former babysitter, she taught it to me. I also took Spanish classes, but now I learned Spanish with my friend Maria, who's from the Dominican Republic.
And building on that, people tend to approach language in different ways. Some enjoy speaking, and then some enjoy listening to music or shows, like you mentioned, and others prefer to read or write. Which part of learning Spanish do you enjoy the most?
Well, learning it and also seeing films in Spanish, especially when they have English subtitles so I can understand what the people are saying.
Do you have a routine or fun ways to keep it interesting?
Glad you brought that up. I practiced Spanish outside of class by watching films dubbed in Spanish so I could understand what the characters are saying.
Okay, all right. And then when you still learn Spanish with your friend Maria, do you guys do anything fun to keep it interesting?
Yeah, we see shows in Spanish, we see films in Spanish, and she's been introducing me to shows, including her favorite, El Chapulín Colorado.
That's awesome. All right, so moving on.
Let's talk about school a little bit more broadly. So everyone has different subjects that they connect with, and some others that they might find challenging. What are your favorite subjects in school, and why do you enjoy them?
Actually, were my favorite subjects. Well, social studies was one of my favorites since learning about history is important, and we got to learn from the past to build the future, as well as keep ourselves from repeating the past. I also loved Spanish class. I loved film class in college, and oh, I loved reading. Math was tough, and it was really. Oh, another favorite subject of mine was science.
When you were doing social studies classes and engaging with history, did you prefer United States history or world history, and why?
I loved both United States history and world history because you got to learn about the world because staying with the familiar isn't the best thing to do. And also only focusing on what our country is like now, but we got to learn from the past to build a better future, and we got to keep ourselves in the present. And
Very true.
learning about Asian American history in college brought me closer to my aunt and cousins because Asian American history is intertwined in my family's DNA. My aunt, who is Japanese American, she her father was an inmate at Manzanar internment camps, the camps. And my cousins, they were adoptees during the one child policy in China.
Okay, so you had the personal connection to the history that you were learning in the classroom. That's really awesome. So is that kind of what propelled your love for learning history? And
Yeah.
did you do some personal research outside of class as well?
Yeah, I interviewed my aunt on what it was like being Japanese American and growing up in the Orange County in the 1970s. It was at this point where I learned that it's important to connect with your audience.
When you're learning, do you prefer to do different hands-on activities or do you like to like read and do some online research?
I love reading, I love listening, and also when I study, seeing films and seeing videos about this kind of stuff to learn about it helps me understand it. In addition, I remember when I was in middle school, we were watching educational videos to help us understand certain subjects. And I also remember seeing Schoolhouse Rock.
Yeah.
And I remember I remember seeing actually I also remember us reading books, but sometimes I tried to understand certain things, but they were very hard. And also, one thing I learned in middle school and high school is that you can teach students subjects when they're ready to understand stuff, like hard subjects like dictatorships, teen pregnancy. I had trouble understanding this stuff because while you shouldn't do these things in a way that are basic, it's important to help people understand this better. But I was too young to understand this stuff, so it's important. I think it's important to educate people about this these tough subjects when they're ready.
Yeah, that's completely true. And it's awesome to hear that both learning and reading had an impact on your academic experience. Would you say that in addition to that learning and reading, you liked doing hands-on activities where you were applying the stuff you were learning in the classroom?
Yep, like I remember us doing art projects to understand certain things. For example, I remember when I was in grammar school in art class and we studied landscapes by learning about Georgia O'Keeffe. It was at these one points where it's important that you got to learn from someone's example while adding your own touch.
And you mentioned earlier about having difficult, a difficult time learning certain subjects. What kind of support helps you when you're tackling something that might be challenging?
Maybe talking to someone like tutoring and sometimes seeing films that tackle this kind of subject can help. But to tackle certain subjects like what subjects are dealing with, one thing that would help would be to ask someone what they went through.
Exactly.
If they're comfortable talking about it. If they talk about it, they could share their experiences with the class, and or if it's private, they could talk about it with in private with they if they have a hard time, if students have a hard time understanding a certain subject that is very overwhelming. You see,
Yeah.
my autism exacerbates certain things. It's just sometimes, it's easy to see things in black and white, but I think in order for people to understand certain things, they could share a film involving that.
Yeah, so you talked about getting support from talking to other people and then them offering their experience and using that to inform your learning. So I was just wondering, was there a specific person that you would always go to talk to them in the face of any struggles or obstacles?
Well, sometimes I spoke to my teachers, but when I was in grammar school and middle school, sometimes the teachers were understanding, but some of the teachers were very strict with me. But in high school, I would see my tutor. I would see tutors also in college, and also in high school, I would see a therapist, a psychologist.
Yeah, and do you think that they like helped you understand what you were learning in the classroom, but also helped you
Yeah.
gather a broader understanding of the world around you?
Yep. But sometimes it was hard to do it. I felt like I had to push through reading these books to understand certain subjects like that, and it wasn't easy
Yeah.
because I as a teenager it was hard, and as a teenager with autism, I had a hard time understanding what it is,
Yeah.
and needless to say, it's easy to see things in black and white.
Yeah, so I mean, really understanding those struggles that you've gone through even makes the progress that you've made even brighter. So we wanted to broaden the conversation to your life experiences specifically, particularly within your healthcare experiences. So experiences in everyday life with doctors, nurses, and other care
Yeah.
providers can really shape who we are and how we interact with other individuals. So I know you mentioned going to therapy in your high school years, but how have your experiences in these areas influenced the way that you approach life today?
Well, before we get into the medical business, my therapists have been very in my counselors in school and the therapists I've been going to see to deal with my struggles have been helping me. Excuse me, like understanding certain things, like being aware of my feelings and of course understanding that I'm never alone. And it's easy to feel alone when you're independent, you're living independently, or we're living in, or if we live in stressful times.
Yeah, so going along with that, could you just describe a little bit about like your current living experiences and who you turn to for help today?
Well, I talk to my friends and I talk to my family and also my supporters, and I text my therapist when I get the chance. You see, I live on my own in this apartment in Manhattan, and whenever I'm concerned about something, I talk to someone, and I strive to figure these things out on my own, and I have a neighbor.
And like one thing that you were talking about was having that support system, and especially in terms of, having support, kindness is huge. And so why do you think kindness is so important in these settings and even more broadly in terms of, just life experiences in general?
Well, let's put it this way. When something bad happens to you, or if you go through a stressful time, it impacts you. And for that reason, you get concerned and sometimes it can traumatize you, other times it can leave a negative influence on you. For example, when I was bullied in Belize for my age and for being a man and for being autism, I it was at this point where I understood that violence is nothing to joke about. Since they made jokes about bloodshed and sexual assault, these bullies.
Obviously, like going based off of this, like in terms of, people who have shown you support in like situations, how do you think that's impacted, who you are today and like the support that you're getting from them?
It's helped me be stronger, and it helped me be more understanding, knowing that like I said, I'm never alone and there's people who have my back, while at the same time I can be independent and make my own choices without falling into the all or nothing trap. And also reminding myself that I'm surrounded by kind people, and it's easy to forget this stuff, but I need to understand that I do handle situations well. I've also positive experiences have left an impact on me, like some wonderful experiences like going to the movies, learning to read, and also the Wizard of Oz play I was in my senior year of high school, and also these times when I helped people. In fact, I have top 10 lists of my special experiences in the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. I'd also like to mention that there were experiences that reminded me that every cloud has a silver lining. For example, on a bigger scale, when we were living in the pandemic, it was tough, but at the same time, I understood that one day it was going to be over. And sure enough, a vaccine was created. And I've always, never once was I scared of going to the doctor, and I've always loved healthcare and going to the doctor because when I was two, because of these wonderful experiences that shaped me. For example, when I was two going on three, I wandered off by mistake at my dad's former restaurant and bumped into a container of boiling stock, and it fell over, scalding the lower part of my body. And I was rushed to a health center, a burn center. Initially, the doctors were going to graft my wound, but instead they decided to clean it. The doctors were very kind, and so was my former pediatrician, Dr. Kaufman, who sadly passed away early last year from cancer. Other positive experiences involving doctors and medicine were when I was 5 and my big sister, she was 6, maybe 7. She came down with a sore throat and she had a doctor visit that was literally and metaphorically straight out of a fairy tale.
Yeah, it sounds like in all of your experiences, you've maintained a lot of optimism. So, how do you think that optimism, when combined with the support system that you have and all those kind people around you, has allowed you to maintain your kindness to other people that you meet?
Well, I know I can be optimistic, but I know I can be that and realistic. Understanding that while we are living in stressful times, we also need to be realistic and not jump to conclusions. My family helps me understand certain things. I've also been optimistic about healthcare and how people care for me and they guide me to be kind, which is why it's important to surround ourselves with kind, understanding people. And also it encouraged me to help others. It's how many moments reminded me that it's important to treat others the way you want to be treated. The golden rule. Speaking of healthcare, I came to, in 2018 and 2023. I helped two women who were friends at Zeno, taking them to the nurse when they had ear problems. In 2018, the same day I took my friend to the nurse for when she had swimmer's ear. On the subway, on the subway, I called 911 when an elderly woman got stuck in the subway doors, fell, and struck her head on the platform.
Well, I mean, that's really good to hear that you're really advocating for the community members around you. So, despite the optimism and realism that you're demonstrating, it's also important to remember that challenges are natural and facing obstacles is very normal for an individual. So, we wanted to see if there's anything that you've learned about yourself through the challenges that you've faced.
Well, the challenges have made me stronger, and also challenges gave me a clear understanding, like understanding like how to treat others and why we need to be aware of the consequences of our actions. And also, my challenges have been helping me be a better person, and helping me understand it's easy for people with autism when they're concerned about something to dwell on it and repeat the same negative feelings and subjects, but sometimes I did that, but at the same time, I do not want to fall into that trap.
And are there any things that people might make like assume about you that aren't necessarily true?
Well, when I was talking to my mom about how I was feeling about the government on the phone with Democrats, someone called me a communist. It was hard to let it go. Yeah, and also I needed to understand that people have their own opinions, but they're not bad people. And of course, it's easy to label someone as the good guy and the bad guy. But sometimes bad people do good. Sometimes bad people have good intentions, and even good people sometimes do things they regret.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something to acknowledge, and it's a really good perspective that you have that there are good people out there, even though they might be doing things that aren't the best and might not have the best impact on other individuals around them. So I think the next question that we wanted to ask was just going back to that idea of being supported in a healthcare setting. So for you, when you're being supported in a healthcare setting by your therapists, doctors, nurses, all of them around you, what actions or attitudes make the biggest difference?
Well, the attitudes is talking to someone about how they feel and understanding them. And when I talk to my therapist, I it reminds me that, like I said, I'm never alone, and there's always a bunch of people there's always kind people looking out for me. And when I see the doctor, I know that I can take care of my health and show consideration for it. While I know that there are some people in this world who aren't so lucky, I feel lucky, and some people get nervous and scared of going to the doctor. The thing is, when I go to the doctor for a checkup, or if something goes wrong, or when I see the nurse at camp for something, it's in case I find out if something's wrong with me, or just or in case I need help, or if I want to help someone. It's just when the doctors take care of me, when they examine me, I feel comfortable with it. I feel happy about it because they're trying to make sure I'm okay. And healthcare isn't just an important thing, it's a necessity. Like I said, while there are some people who aren't so lucky, I know that there are some people who are luckier than me, and some people who are just as lucky. And also, I can understand that when I took people to the doctor, to the nurse at Zeno, and when I am taken care of, it also led me to understand that just as autism and other disabilities are hardly tackled in media and real life, there are certain conditions and diseases that are hardly tackled in real life, like auditory problems like ear infections, swimmer's ear, hearing loss, and, and tinnitus.
Yeah, so I just heard you talk a little bit about how autism is a little underrepresented in the media. So I just wanted to see if you could elaborate a little bit more on that and where you've identified that, because that's something really crucial to talk about.
Yep. When I was growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, I knew few people on the autism spectrum like me. And in films, there was hardly a character with a disability. Characters with disabilities were mostly the bad guys. And it wasn't until the but there were a few characters I saw with disabilities. From Garrett, the vision impaired warrior in the underrated Warner Brothers fantasy Quest for Camelot, and Dory, who has short term memory loss in Finding Nemo. It wasn't until the early 2010s where I saw more characters with autism presented on the screen, like Claire Danes' portrayal of Temple Grandin, Christopher Boone in The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, and Max Horowitz in the adult animated film Mary and Max. But there wasn't any character with autism in a Disney film or a family flick. And when I grew up in the 90s and 2000s, and more autism representation has been gaining traction in a lot of media, including Renee from Disney Pixar's Loop, of course, Christopher Boone from The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, and more. And needless to say, people have been learning to go beyond these certain stereotypes. And my experiences with autism and the fact that there were hardly any people with disabilities in the films I saw growing up in the 90s and 2000s, that I decided to create diverse stories. And one of them, which is soon to be self-published, is Kingdom of the Fairies, a fantasy novel I wrote about a fairy princess on the autism spectrum who is born unable to produce magic.
You mentioned having, films having a really big impact on your life and also, the stories that you wrote. So how have films that include people with autism helped you feel more seen and represented? And how has that contributed to the stories that you are creating?
Well, it was when you the one of the most important things about writing a story is or creating a film is that you have to connect with your audience. When I grew up in the 90s, many of the main characters felt out of place, and there were the moments I was like, that's definitely me. But when I saw more characters on the autism spectrum, I thought, you hardly ever see that in a film or a book or TV show. And also, it was at this point where I've come to understand that disabilities are hardly shown in film, and I wanted to present that in Kingdom of the Fairies, and I wanted to create a heroine who viewers can identify with and say that's definitely and lead them to say that's definitely me. And also because my sister had a sore throat and my young cousin and friends I know, some of them have autism, some of them have hearing loss, but like I said, many ailments are hardly tackled like sore throats and ear infections because there was never a main character who struggled with auditory problems like tinnitus, which my dad struggles with, um, swimmer's ear, which many of my friends struggle with, which is hardly tackled, and of course, ear infections because it's a common ailment for young children. It happened to my cousin.
Next, we would just like to continue on to some final advice that you could possibly give to our audience, and see if you could connect with them. So, if you could give people some guidance on how to be more understanding and more empathetic towards others, what would you want them to know?
Three things. One, learn to put yourself in another person's shoes. Two, think about how the other person is feeling so you can understand and understand what they're going through, but don't be condescending. And three, when I was at the premiere, when I was at the premiere of this film I'm in called Plight, I said understand that if you treat others kindly, then you get good karma. And actually, what I said was on people with disabilities and other people, you can't change what people are born with, their sexual orientation, or the color of their skin, but we can change the way we see them.
Thank you so much for taking the time to share your thoughts today, and I really love the advice that you gave. It's been incredible hearing about your experiences and your perspectives.
Absolutely.
Thank
We
you.
hope our listeners take this conversation to heart and remember that understanding, empathy, and kindness can truly change someone's day or even their life. Thanks for listening to All Things Autism by Court One, and we'll see you next time.